Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
Welcome to the Grow Renaissance show. On here we have myself, Will Taylor, and then we have Austin Allred. Today, in episode number 1, we're going to be talking about what is the Grow Renaissance, how did we get here, what exactly is it, and Austin and I have known each other forever. So some quick backstory on us. We met each other playing rugby back in college, played rugby, got married, and I got married. Right after I got married, I moved to Austin's farm and lived in a single wide trailer with my wife, dug holes, not very well, but worked for 3 months, and we've done a lot of stuff since then. So I'll let Austin introduce himself, tell you who he is as well. Shoot, Austin.
Thanks, Will. Just so you know, that was not a single wide trailer. That was a fifth wheel, but same idea.
We didn't even get to
It was awesome. That's good times. I grew up here in Royal City, Washington. My father's a farmer. My grandfather's both farmers. So I've been in the food world for a long time, growing food. Moved away when I graduated from high school. That's when I met Will in college. Spent 4 years in college. Spent a couple years away on a mission. Spent a few more years away working for farms across the country. And then came back home with a passion to take farming to the next level and to be able to really tell a story about food that I think was really, really missing.
When you look at that story of food that was missing, what's the piece that you feel like was missing?
So it kind of goes to both sides of the spectrum, right? In this spectrum, on one side I got the consumer, and on the other side is the producer. And the consumer has never been more disconnected from their food, just the way it is, right? There's a lot of people, 1.5–2% of the people are farmers. Most people do not touch their food anymore until they're about to eat it. On the other side is the farmer, who likewise was disconnected from the consumer. Kind of this urban-rural divide. So I think that was the biggest kind of aha moment that I had when I moved away from home, is I started realizing that there's a huge disconnect between people and their food.
And so backstory, I'm running gyms. Austin actually helped me buy my first gym. We get into that gym. He calls me and says, hey, me and some of my team, we want to lose weight. So I start working with him. And in that process, you had the idea of Farm Tracer, which was the original idea to start tracking and tracing the things that you were doing on the farm to kind of solve that problem, which was the disconnect from the farmer to the consumer. Tell us a little bit about that process. Like, you got back home, you're working on the farm, you start seeing what you're doing, and Farm Tracer goes from an idea to you call me and say, hey, I want to do this. Walk us through that process.
So it started when I started our ranch. My dad was a potato farmer. My brothers and dad did a lot of fruit. I started doing dairy farming, and so we had a diversified bunch of products, but most of those products were getting sold pretty typical in the ag system. So we were selling them wholesale to a processor. They turn them in, put them in the bags, clean them, and then they would sell those to a consumer or a retailer, who then is going to sell out to the end consumer. So that was what we were in. I started a beef ranch, which started growing cattle, grazing them on our land, and I really wanted to vertically integrate. And so that was what the goal of the beef ranch was. But with that, we had the options. We had a lot of land. We had a diverse farm. We had the options to go organic, grass-fed, never ever. We had all sorts of options. We were starting this brand fresh from the beginning. And I considered all those things, and I really came to the conclusion that I could do any of those. Really, with the systems we had, I could have done any of those brands, any of those labels, if you will. But I concluded it was broken. I didn't want to play the dog and pony show, which you play with every single one of those labels. It's fine. Like, a lot of them have good intentions, but when they get scaled, they lose their purity. And so I concluded I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted complete transparency, complete traceability from the food to the table, from the farm to the fork. So that's what Farm Tracer, that's the genesis of Farm Tracer, is let's just use our on-farm management tools throughout the whole system, and then let's give access to the end consumer of all those management tools that we're going to use to raise our animals. And let's open that up. When somebody buys that beef at the end, let's show them all of that, complete all of it, all the systems that went in to growing that animal, what it ate, where it lived, when it was born, who its sire was, what its breed is, all that, what I call now the blockchain, all that blockchain of that animal. I wanted to be able to share that with the end consumer. So that's the beginning.
I love it. And so we started this. You start tracking and tracing. You build a Web 2.0 based application, and you mentioned blockchain, which we're going to dive to as we get deeper and deeper into this, because that really became the genesis of what we now refer to as the Grow Renaissance. But you've created this transparency. You took it, you put it in the app, you started showing it. What were some wins that came out of that? And also go into some of the cons that came from doing that and trying to grow Farm Tracer and bring it to other farms. But start with the pros.
Pros is people loved it, right? People absolutely loved to be able to have the transparency of their food. So it really opened up. It was the crutch to a very successful brand now called Royal Ranch. We now sell 300,000 pounds of beef a week. I don't want to say with ease because people who work with me will slap me in the face, but we do. We have a very strong brand, and we're selling a lot of beef, and we could sell more if we had it. So we have a really successful Royal Ranch brand which sells their own beef, and a lot of that success came from Farm Tracer, our willingness to share that transparency. So that was probably the biggest success. We have really good customers. I think a notable customer was Climate Pledge. So just a quick story to kind of highlight this topic. Climate Pledge Arena it's a big arena in Seattle, Washington, and it's where the Supersonics used to play. It's where the Seattle Kraken play. It's where the WNBA team, the Storm, play. It's where the Supersonics are going to come back to. And Amazon is the one who put all the money in to buy the rights of this arena. So for all intensive purposes, it should be called Amazon Arena. But they wanted to really highlight some of the climate smart solutions that they were implementing and insisting that came with that sponsorship. So they actually call it Climate Pledge Arena. And so with that sponsorship comes from really strict rules. One of those being 80% of the food needs to be carbon neutral. So at the beginning, beef was not going to be on their menu across the whole arena. They were going to go with all this fake bullshit meat, and it wasn't going to be there. But with the connections, the timing was perfect. We communicated with them, we got it set up, and we became the sole supplier for the Climate Pledge Arena. So that was one of our first customers, one of our first wins in that whole storyline of Royal Ranch.
I love it. Something that I'm glad you told the Climate Pledge Arena, because I think that's a huge win. And as I've gone around, just to kind of put timelines on this all started about 6 years ago. So this has been in the works. I mean, Austin, you've been back home on the farm for over a decade now, right? Is that we're getting old?
Yeah, we're getting old, dude.
It feels like not that long ago we were 19 running around. But this has all been in the works for over a decade. But the Farm Tracer side specifically, just over 6 years ago, kind of becoming into development production. And as I've gone through coaching people all over the world on the health side, and now coming into the blockchain side and traveling the world, talking about, I always do this grow bet. I have people raise their hands and I say, okay, close your eyes, raise your hands, and I want you to think about what you have eaten in the last 72 hours. And raise your hand if you can think of what you've eaten. Everybody can keep their hand up. Now, I want you to keep your hand raised if you would love to know everything that went into what you ate, what it ate, how it was grown, any chemicals that were used on it. 100% of people keep their hand raised on that. And then I asked the question, okay, keep your hand raised if you can prove that second question of what you've eaten in the last 72 hours. And I've done this now with tens of thousands of people, and no one has been able to win that bet. I joke sometimes I'll transfer a Bitcoin right now to anybody that can win that bet. And the only person that's gotten close is somebody that was on a 5-day fast, meaning that he hadn't eaten anything in the last 3 days. But this is the problem, and we see the pros that you're talking about with Climate Pledge Arena. Your ability to sell beef at 300,000, I don't know, what was it, 300,000 pounds a week of beef with a high demand. We'll say that because I know there's a ton of work that goes into it, but with a high demand. So it's very, very positive. Go to the other side of the coin now. As we looked at growing Farm Tracer, expanding that to more and more industries, more products, what were some of the cons that you ran into in that process?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not a tech guy, and so there was a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to kind of Web 2 in sharing that transparency. So I think most notable was people frankly don't want to share their data. And even my own family. I mean, I'm a little bit unique, but I went to my cousin, for example, and I kind of introduced this as we were looking to branch out and do this in the apples and the cherries that we grow. And he told me to F off, in the sense that I'm not going to share my data with you or anybody. And that includes the USDA. I mean, so to give a little backstory, and I mean, farmers have a lot of different agencies who regulate us, and a lot of times that data gets kind of utilized for different purposes that we don't have control of. I think that's true of any industry. Shoot, that's true of any person, any data that's out there. So farmers, it was an unwillingness to share the data, and we're talking about when I tried to scale this beyond just Royal Ranch and what I was doing personally. So that was one of the real issues we came up against when trying to roll out this Web 2 sort of template for Farm Tracer. Um, Along with that is we kind of had this concept, this idea that we're going to then be able to sell our food for more. And in the typical agriculture model, you have very much this complex supply chain. You go from producer all the way to the end consumer, and there's a lot of players in the middle who aren't necessarily concerned about the producer or the end consumer. So we are vertically integrated in a few of our products, like the beef, for example. But anything that we weren't vertically integrated in, we had a really hard time finding a formula that allowed us to like charge more for the product. So in other words, justify the expenses that went into Farm Tracer and the high management that went into tracking all of our food. So it really became a difficult kind of business model financially to justify when the typical supply chain in agriculture really wasn't willing to pay more for it. Yes, people loved it, but when it came down to, oh, this is so awesome, thank you, I'd love it. Oh, it's so cool. Scan the barcode and see where our beef came from. Cool. I want 50 cents more for my beef. Well, I mean, Tyson Foods is selling beef for, 50 cents off that. It's like, okay, well, so we really did come to it was hard in the typical model, in the typical ag supply chain, to say, yeah, we're gonna make 20% more on our beef or on our commodities because we're doing this, because frankly all those middle like wholesalers and processors weren't really willing to take that risk with me. So we kind of had to step outside and be like, we're either gonna have to be completely vertically integrated or find a different model to justify doing all this extra work. That makes sense?
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Makes a ton of sense. And leads us in perfectly to where we are now, which is you're doing all of that work on the farm. I moved to Puerto Rico, kind of unknowing that there's this massive crypto blockchain hub living there, and run into one of the biggest Bitcoin miners in North America. And they introduce us into blockchain. So we go to try to grow Farm Tracer. We run into farmers not wanting to give out their data, a model that we believe has a lot of room for growth and is frankly pretty broken, and probably most importantly, consumers that have a high demand and want to know where their food comes from. And so we run into this new way of doing business, this new model that becomes blockchain, which is a community-based, decentralized driven model that actually has immutability on the blockchain that our Web 2 Farm Tracer app doesn't have. Can we move that into Web 3? And so I remember I meet these guys, I call you, and I start talking about blockchain, and we're both trying to wrap our head around it. This is just over 2 years ago. Go back to that time. Like you come to that. Do you remember what that was like, kind of opening that can of worms up?
Yeah, I was in the gym with my kids without a shirt on, and you called me with these big old mega dudes who are, and I was like, "Hey, what's up, Will?" And we're on FaceTime, and then there's these guys in the background who, unbeknownst to me, were some VIPs. But anyway, yeah, I remember that. It was awesome. Yeah, I mean, so like we're Farm Tracer. I mean, it was kind of just, what's the word? Staggering. Like we had it on our beef, we had our customers, it was being used, but it was clear that there was going to be one of two things that had to happen. One, we had to kind of completely change our model and jump in with 2 feet and manage the hell out of it to make it go next level. Or we had to be willing to kind of sell it off and give it to somebody who's going to do that. And so me and you were kind of talking about what are we going to do with Farm Tracer? We love the idea, but it's going to need a lot. And we both were in positions where we were doing like cool stuff, and we weren't really there. So it was kind of the perfect timing. And I just, a little sidebar, Will. I mean, I think it's worth noting. We talk many times a week, and at least once in our weekly phone calls, we talk about, I was doing this, you were doing this, in this collision of fate that has all weaved together to do this. And so I guess I just want to kind of throw that in there as we're going through this. Keep that in mind, all the listeners. Like, all these things were happening. In hindsight, it's just really incredible to look back and to see you were getting trained in this aspect, I was getting trained in this aspect. We felt like we were kind of tripping and working hard through some of these things, but all to what we see now and the vision of the Grow Renaissance. It's just kind of blowing up. But that's hindsight. So as we kind of are digging deep into these different chapters of this storybook, just keep that in mind, because it was kind of at that phase of, it's either got to be all in or all out.
I think that's perfect. And I think we've talked a lot about the things that we have done that got us here, including blockchain. And in the next episode, we're gonna dive deep into blockchain and why everything that we've built now has been moved into the blockchain, what exactly that means, what the pros of that are. But right now, we're talking about what you just mentioned, which is the birth of what we've now coined as a community as the Grow Renaissance. And that's moving into leveraging everything that time, energy, work, fate has brought us to. And that term is something that we've come to kind of be the umbrella term for everything that we're doing. And Austin, if you'll take a second and dive into, what does the Grow Renaissance mean to you, and how did you get here?
Yeah, I feel like I'm a little bit stuck in the middle of all these different sort of fads and opinions when it comes to food. I'm a commercial food grower. I grow food. It's a family-owned farm, but we grow food commercially at scale. We are a commercial farm. And then on the other side, I am super passionate about these regenerative systems, about using God's systems to grow our food and reduce our dependency on synthetic fertilizers. So I find myself in a lot of these different circles with kind of the radical commercial farmer who's like, nobody understands. This is the only way to do it. If the consumer knew what they were talking about, they would not be pushing this on us, or they'd go hungry, right? Like, there's kind of that radical section. And then I'm in the middle of these other circles where there's a radical regenerative section who's like, oh, we got to all be tiny farmers. We need farms in our backyard. That's the only way to move forward and to kind of heal our earth. Um, and I kind of find myself in the middle of a lot of these circles, and I agree with aspects of everything they're saying. And so I really feel like my calling and where I need to where I am is to try to marry those two together, to continue to feed the world, because there is a reality that if we move too quickly or do things the wrong way in blowing up this agriculture supply chain, that we will go hungry. We will create the ultimate problem. Um, that's real. But then there's the other side that we do need to be more regenerative. We need to make some adjustments, make some changes, and then heal some of the pieces that are broken. So I sit right in the middle of that, I guess. And and that's where the grow renaissance to me is to be able to feed the world regeneratively, which it sounds simple, but there is, and we can dive deeper if we want, but there is some colliding realities in those two views.
I think that's beautiful. And that's exactly what the Grow Renaissance is here for, is to bring the best minds, the best practices to accomplish the mission of Grow, which is to nourish the world and to do it in the best way possible. And the earth, God, it showed us the way for hundreds of thousands of years. And I feel like we're at this crux of taking the most innovative technology on the planet with blockchain and AI, merging that with the best practices that the earth has. And when we bring those together and we match it with a community of people that are willing to put in their data in a decentralized way, be able to use that knowledge that comes from that data to then use the best practices all over the world, then we all rise together. And that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do. And it's going to take, it's not just me, it's not just you, it's everybody. It's a global effort to try and come in. And that's really what the Grow Renaissance is trying to be. It's just the foundation of that for the best minds in the world, the best people out there putting the blood, sweat, and tears to produce the food. If we bring them all together, we'll get the best. And I believe we nourish everybody at the highest level possible for humanity.
Yeah, there's such a sweet spot here of marrying tradition and technology. And when we bring those two together in the right way, then we can accomplish what we want to accomplish, and that's feeding the world in the best way possible, with the most transparency possible, with the most nutritious, dense foods possible, with the most environmentally friendly practices as possible, and using real data, real collection of macro data to determine what actually works and what doesn't work, instead of playing into a whole bunch of marketing strategies that are just trying to sell food for more money. And anyway, just instead of just prolonging the existence of a very broken labeling model.
I love it. All right, let's end with this. I feel like if you didn't know what the Grow Renaissance was before this, you now have a little taste. And maybe Austin, just to close, if I'm listening to this for the first time, I'm coming to this, why should I keep following along with the things that are happening on both the Grow blockchain and the Grow Renaissance?
So it solves the problems. I mean, the Web3 system, the blockchain, the transparency, it has outlined a really, really incredible system for us to be able to use in order to accomplish these goals of feeding the world in the best way possible, while still having kind of a financial scenario that fits that and works. So it solves all those problems that we have found in the middle. And I think, Will, you're the one who brought this up, and maybe I'll turn it back to you because I love the concept because it really meets me. It really resonated with me. We started with like kind of this grow revolution, and why revolution is not the right term, and why renaissance is the right term as we look at what we're trying to accomplish, kind of in this balanced middle ground of the radical different ideas and trying to fit it all into a balanced middle ground.
Okay, that's a good way to end. So I used to present.
I could have said it, but you're better at it.
All right, I'll end us with this. So I've presented this now, like I said, over tens of thousands of people. And as we dove into the blockchain and all the things that we've talked about today, I used to get on and say, welcome to the Grow Revolution. And the more I presented, the more people that I talked to, and the more I thought about what it actually means to have a revolution. It does change. And I believe the blockchain revolution is real. It's going to come in and it's going to change the way that we do things in a digital world and match them to real world assets and how we live. But when I looked at every revolution that has ever happened in history, they're generally bloody. They overthrow. And if you just take the definition of what revolution is, it's circular, meaning that it has to come back around, meaning it leads to another revolution. And most of the time, there's revolution after revolution. But when you look back to the Renaissance and what it brought to the world and what it brought to humanity, it brought forth more light, more knowledge, a better way of living, a different way of thinking, and a different way of being. And I believe that that's what we have the opportunity to do here with the Grow Renaissance. We have the opportunity to take all of the knowledge of how we've been living and growing and surviving into this innovative digital tech that we have now with AI and blockchain. And if we do it as a community, as we do it to where the cream rises to the top, then we won't actually have a revolution. We will be able to solve things like world hunger. We'll be able to have nutrient-dense food and understand what that actually means, how to live long, vital lives again. And that's what we want to do. And it comes down to not just one person, not two people, not 100, but as many people as possible that we can get behind that, and we win. And winning looks like finding the best way to nourish the earth, nourish the people that are on it, the plants and animals, and be good stewards while we're here living. So that's what the Grow Renaissance is to me. You've heard what it is to Austin. We are going to be on these episodes updating you on everything going on, more information. The next episode is going to talk all about the Grow blockchain and how we are taking blockchain technology into everything that we're doing. So thank you for listening to this first episode. Please like, subscribe, share anywhere that you're listening to this, and help us spread the message. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Renaissance podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this episode. Remember, it will take a community of us to do the best in the world and truly nourish not only ourselves, but the planet, the atmosphere, the soil, the plants, and the animals on it. So make sure you spread this message anywhere that you can.